Alright, we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Good afternoon and welcome to Macon State University Connect Now seminar. Very special welcome to our guest speaker, our faculty and staff, and our wonderful students here at MGA. Thank you to each and every one of you for taking time out of your day to be with us today. My name is Ashley Thompson and I work in the Office of Campus Culture and Community. Before we get started, I'm going to cover a few house rules. So if you can, please silence all phones. Please remember that our training is going to be recorded. And we do ask that you save your questions till the end. All right, now time for the fun part. The next person you will hear is Elaine Martin. She works in the Office of Student Affairs as our Student Care Case Manager.
Thank you. I appreciate being called the fun part. So as Ashley mentioned, I'm the Student Care Case Manager here with the Assessment and Care team, and I also serve as the point of contact for Mark, Georgia. So I am excited to see everybody here today because this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart because as part of my role here, I work with students who face adversity, whether it's homelessness, food insecurity, coming out of foster care, or just struggling with mental health issues. I see them on a daily basis. Now, I always try to encourage resiliency and connect students to the network of support we do have here at MGA and the broader community at large. So that's why I was really excited to have Resilient Middle Georgia here because this is something I know that our students face daily. So I hope you get as much from it as I will. If you're not familiar with Resilient Middle Georgia is a trauma-informed community building agency, and their mission is to build a common language and understanding around adversity, trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and at the same time empower and identify community champions who will join the trauma-informed peer network. So I want to take a minute to introduce our speaker, Amanda Juarez. She is joined Resilient Middle Georgia in June of 2022 as a project coordinator on contract with Macon Community Partnership. Amanda coordinates Resilient Middle Georgia's daily operations. She does their rural collaborations, outreach, awareness, and their grant requirements. So she's fairly busy, so I'm glad she can make time with us today. Also, Amanda graduated from Middle Georgia State University, a former Knight, with her Bachelor of Science in Psychology. So while she was with us, she spent her time wisely working with community agencies to support mental health initiatives, as well as focus on trauma-informed care, resiliency, and healthy coping skills in the community. She is a member of the Society for Community Research and Action, a member of the Alliance for Macon Mental Health Matters Initiative, as part of the Community Engagement, Education, and Outreach Work Group for One Safe Place Macon, home of the region's first Family Justice Center. So join me in welcoming Amanda back to MGA.
Whichever works. Did you want to do the slides? Okay. Is that okay? Okay. Sorry, we don't have a clicker, so I was trying to figure out which way. I feel like if I do the presentation over there, I'm gonna go ahead and sit down, and so I will stand over here at the podium. So thank you so much for that introduction. Again, my name is Amanda Juarez. I'm the project coordinator with Resilient Middle Georgia. We are part of a statewide initiative. So we're not a nonprofit, we are an initiative. We are grant funded. Oh, sorry. And we have a coalition of more than 120 partners in the Middle Georgia area. Oh, I'm like used to my laptop. Can you do the next slide, please? Sorry, Jenna.
I'll just hold.
There we go. This kind of gives an overview of our service areas. So we do service 14 counties in Middle Georgia. And again, as Elaine mentioned, our goal is to inform communities about the impact of both adverse and positive childhood experiences. So we largely do this through free evidence-based training and initiatives. We have also gotten a collaborative together and actually trained professionals in Middle Georgia to implement these policies and systems change within their organizations. And so we are grant funded and we do disperse this funding within other organizations to go ahead and implement and make these changes. So I don't have a slide here that's showing the members from our leadership team, But I also have Miss Deborah Jackson over here, and she is our AmeriCorps Public Health member who is a big part of our community outreach. She is the one that actually started this collaboration. She came to Middle Georgia State, and I can't remember who you spoke with, but gave the initial information about who we are, what we do. She's been so instrumental about getting this information out there and really making these connections. And so I'm so happy that she's here today. And you probably can't see Sophie. Sophie is her service dog, and she's hiding now under the table. So we're happy to be here today. And next slide. Sorry. So what I'm going to cover today is called Connect Now. So this is a shortened version, part of a larger evidence-based training and workshop. And so sometimes you will see me reading from some slides just because since it is evidence-informed, evidence-based, that we do kind of want to make sure we cover some bases as well. So I'll go ahead and read this one actually. So as the statewide leaders of primary prevention in the area of child abuse, Georgia Center for Child Advocacy and Prevent Child Abuse Georgia have created a collaborative effort to effectively educate communities about adverse childhood experiences, or what we call ACEs. Now this collaboration partners with local organizations and groups of adults working with or caring for children in order to prevent ACEs for future generations. So a lot of the training that we do provide is geared towards other professionals who work with children and families. I have modified some of these slides because I know, it may not, forgetting the word I want to say, it may not quite go as, oh my goodness, I'm losing the word that I want to say. I have modified it so that it makes a little bit more sense with everybody. So even if you don't have children, if you're not planning on working with children in a setting, maybe in a pediatric care facility or in therapy sessions, for instance, it still applies to us. So sorry, I forgot the word that I wanted to use. Next slide, Deborah. So today, again, we are going to be talking about ACEs, both nationally and locally here in Georgia. I'm going to provide information on how caring connections can serve as a primary buffer to adversity and trauma. And I'm also going to share some examples of how you can build resilience in children and within yourselves. So we'll close, of course, by talking about the Connections Matter Georgia initiative and how you can get involved if you are interested. Next slide. So by a show of hands, how many have heard of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs? Got three in the room. So this actually, it was one of the largest investigative studies of child abuse, neglect, and household challenges, and the potential outcomes of negative health outcomes of life, health, and well-being. My goodness gracious, I'm having a moment, sorry. So this slide here, I'm actually going to show you just a short 2-minute trailer of the documentary called Resilience. And the reason why we show this, it provides a good foundation for the ACEs study. Videos are sometimes much more fun to watch than somebody standing here talking as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and play this, and it provides, again, a good foundation for the ACEs study and how it impacts our health. I think you're okay to just click this slide.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
We all like to think of childhood as this time of joy and innocence. But for many of us, it's just not true.
When you grow up in these type of situations, it's not something you talk about. I know I did it.
Can y'all hear it okay?
The first thing that we talk is that adverse childhood experience.
Yeah, we may pause it and go back. Sorry about that. I'm so used to everything being kind of where the podium is, and I didn't think about ensuring that the volume is actually steady, so I'm sorry.
We all like to think of childhood
Thumbs up in the back if
as
you
this
can
time
hear
of
it.
joy and
Okay.
innocence. But for many of us, it's just not true.
When you grow up in these type of situations, it's not something you talk about. I know I did it.
The first thing that we found is that adverse childhood experiences are common.
don't know what's going on, they won't remember anyway. Well, the child may not remember, but the body remembers.
There was this incredible gene whiz effect. The adverse childhood experiences cause heart disease and lung disease and liver and cancer.
Exposure to trauma affects children's developing brains. The impact is on your behavior, it's on your heart, it's on your DNA. Like, how do you deal with all that?
We have a whole new body of knowledge now that could open up what we have up till now been seen as intractable and solvable problems.
No child can be punched or hit. No child can be punched or hit.
If you can get the science into the hands of the general population, they will invent very wise actions.
Do you feel like any of the interventions have been making a difference?
They made all the difference in the world.
It's there, it's possible. And a defeatist attitude is completely disconnected from what 21st century science discovers. And we should be going after them like a bear.
So we like to play that trailer because it does give kind of a good brief overview for the original ACEs study. Has anybody ever seen that documentary by chance? So it's about an hour long. It's actually a really good documentary to watch. It is more than 10 years old, but the information within the documentary actually still holds true today. So if that's ever something we're interested in showing here at the school, we can do that as well. But to summarize the original, the background of the original ACEs study, there were two studies conducted. So one was with the CDC and one with Kaiser Permanente in the mid-1990s. And what they looked at were the impacts of childhood trauma on patients' ability to quit smoking and to lose weight. So over 17,000 individuals receiving physical exams completed confidential surveys regarding their childhood experiences and their current health status and behaviors. So it is important to note, though, that in the original studies, the participants were a group of mostly educated, white, employed citizens. But since then, the study has been replicated in many different cultures and communities, and the correlations still hold true, and in some cases are worse, actually, in other communities. Next slide. Now, what they found is that ACEs are common. 64% of Americans experienced at least one ACE. More than 1 in 5 reported 3 or more ACEs. And of course, there's an increased likelihood of experiencing additional ACEs if you have experienced at least one. So again, the original study only asked 10 questions, and it was regarding 3 types of abuse, 2 types of neglect, and 5 household challenges. So again, if you were experienced one ACE, you were more likely to experience others. So for instance, if you had a family member who was incarcerated or domestic violence in the home, these often co-occur with some other ACEs, such as substance abuse problems or mental illness as well. Next slide. So again, what they found is that ACEs are common, they're interrelated, and they're powerful. ACEs are generally co-occurring, and so this is called polyvictimization. And polyvictimization refers to multiple victimizations of different kinds. So not just experiencing the same type of adversity or same type of abuse or violence, So for instance, when a person reports physical abuse in childhood, they are 11 times more likely to witness domestic violence. They're 17 times more likely to experience emotional abuse, 6 times more likely to experience sexual abuse, and 5 times more likely to experience mental illness or substance use in their household. So the CDC actually continues ongoing collection of data, and they drill that information by state. So the first Georgia ACE survey data was collected in 2016, and then again in 2018 and 2020. And this was from the Behavioral Risk Factors Data System. So the surveys that they conduct, they are phone-based surveys conducted throughout the state with non-institutionalized adults over the age of 18. So when we say non-institutionalized adults, this means individuals who are incarcerated or in nursing homes, for instance, are not included in this study. And the combined sample size from this data is close to 12,000 Georgians. And what they found is that this mostly models the outcomes of the national study. So it found that 3 in 5, or roughly 60% of Georgians report ACEs.
Of those 3 and 5 Georgians who report ACEs, 23% reported experiencing at least one, 21% reported 2 to 3, and 18% reported 4 or more ACEs in childhood. And within that study, when they asked the original 10 questions, it was regarding experiences before the age of 18. What they also found is that adults with 4 or more ACEs were more likely to have poor mental health, have been diagnosed with depression, have difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions, and engage in risky health behaviors. Next slide. So again, of this original study, they found again that ACEs are common. More than half of the surveyed population reported at least one ACE or experiencing at least one ACE. ACEs negatively affect our health and well-being, and they can change our lifespan. So over the next few slides, we're going to talk specifically about how that works and how that's happening. Next slide. So when we talk about ACEs actually having poor health outcomes, many ways this can happen is through engaging in risky health behaviors. So, such as smoking or substance use, for instance. So it also increases our risk of mental health problems. And I guess you can click one more time if you hit. There we go. And this happens because experiencing adversity in childhood while our brains are developing actually affects our brain development. And by a show of hands, or no, not a show of hands, go ahead and word out if you know at what age your brain is fully developed. 25, a lot of people know. Okay, awesome. Yay. 25. So, our frontal lobe, as many of you know, is the last part of our brain to develop. And this involves our executive functioning. So this means impulse control, decision making. So if you think about experiencing childhood adversity, it's affecting our neural networks and our brain development. So we would be more likely then to engage in certain behaviors because we wouldn't then take the time to think through some of the decisions that we make. And that can, as a result, then end up in poor health outcomes. Now, it is important to note, though, this study has found that individuals who have experienced adversity in childhood who did not engage in any risky health behaviors were still more likely to have negative health outcomes as a result of experiencing adversity in childhood. So a lot of this is because it lives in our body. So has anybody read the book, The Body Keeps the Score? Or have you heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score? So this happens because, even though we have experiences, memories in childhood, as time goes on, sometimes we forget the actual events, right? So our memory changes, we forget maybe locations, names. Our body still remembers those experiences. And so our body still holds on to a lot of the adversity, a lot of the anxiety that we may experience. And I don't want to get too deep into that brain development and how that works, and I'm sure a lot of you may know in this room already. But we will go into how this affects health outcomes, so on the next slide here. So as the original study found, experiencing 4 or more ACEs, compared to those individuals who have 0, you significantly impacts the likelihood of developing certain health outcomes such as cancer, diabetes, arthritis, stroke, COPD, and depression. And as this says, 4 or more ACEs indicate a significant level of childhood trauma that greatly increases the risk of poor health outcomes. Next slide, sorry. I was looking at my notes and I realized I had a note about something that I had already mentioned, so it threw me off. So this slide here talks about how this changes our lifespan. So the number of ACEs a person has in childhood, of course, and the number of ACEs, as that number goes up, the risk of negative health outcomes are related, of course. So the higher the number, the more the risk for developing such things as depression, liver disease, heart disease, even suicide attempts, adolescent pregnancy as well. And all of these, of course, can change our lifespan. The study did find that those experiencing 6 or more ACEs had an increased risk of dying 20 years earlier than individuals who had not experienced any. Again, this sounds very negative. It is really important to remember, though, that the data found within the studies, these are not predictions, right? These are correlations. So, and also the adversity someone experiences is not a direct cause of the health outcome. It is only a correlation to a higher risk. So going back, next slide, to the original study, there were only 10 questions, right? And again, there were original limitations with the study because again, it only captured data from mostly educated, employed Caucasian citizens, right? But the study only captured about 45% of childhood trauma. So can anybody in this room, and feel free to raise your hand or just blurt out, some adverse experiences that you can think of? Well, actually, we may go to the next slide. So, some adverse experiences that you can think of. Actually, go back, sorry. I'm sorry, there's usually another slide within here. So the original study had 10 questions regarding 3 types of abuse, 2 types of neglect, and 5 household challenges. Of those household challenges, they were parents' separation, divorce, having somebody in your household incarcerated, domestic violence, substance use, and mental illness. So of those, can you think of any other adverse experiences that children go through?
Hunger?
Hunger, absolutely.
Homelessness.
Homelessness, yes.
Bullying.
Bullying, yes, absolutely right. Sorry, now we'll go to the next slide. I'm so sorry about that. So, the original study, again, it was in the mid-1990s, and this really dates me because if anybody else is around my age and you realize that was like 30 years ago, that it was quite some time ago. We have now begun to look at the pair of ACEs or the trifecta. So this slide here shows the original 10 ACE questions represent the leaves on the trees here, which are easily seen. These are the things that you see in communities, right? In addition to that, we have adverse community environments, and these are things like unaffordable housing, systemic racism, joblessness, poverty, community violence. And within those, we actually show the soil here, and these represent adverse collective historical events. And so these refer to experiences that impact large populations of people, like the Holocaust, slavery, genocide, or refugees fleeing hostile environments. And even of this slide, there are certain things that aren't even included here, and so we continue to add more. So one of the most recent includes the pandemic that we've all been through. Bullying is another one. I think chronic illness or experiencing, if you continue to go into the hospital or if you have a family relative who suffers from chronic illness, that is another adverse experience as well. And so of the original study, we did talk about that it is common, 64% of Americans experience at least one ACE. That does not even include all of these other experiences that we're going through. So if you think about if these are unaddressed, you think about the compounded impacts that this does have on individuals. So next slide. Now we'll go to something a little bit more lighthearted instead of talking about the negative experiences. In hearing about that, I did not provide the questionnaire today. It is something that I can provide afterwards if you choose to do that on your own time. You could also Google it as well, and if you want to find out what your ACE score is. We don't just focus on the ACE score now, because just thinking about that, then you think, oh my gosh, I've had all these experiences, I must be doomed now. Like it's already happened, it's in my body, there's no way around it, right? We can actually mitigate the effects of experiencing ACEs. So in preventing them as well, we can eliminate chronic conditions, health risk behaviors, negative socioeconomic outcomes. But what we try to do with Resilient Middle Georgia and in the larger community, because we are one of many different organizations and systems who are working towards making these changes, but we're working to create healthy individuals, healthy families in their communities, healthy school systems, and we focus on primary prevention so we can reduce the risk for ACEs. Even if you had experienced adversity in childhood, there are ways to work to mitigate those effects. And so, next slide here. One way to do this is through positive experiences. So positive experiences buffer those bad experiences. So when we're talking about ACEs, it's important to also talk about relational wealth. Has anybody heard that term before, relational wealth? So being connected in a healthy way to a social network. So even just having one positive, stable relationship can actually balance the negative outcomes and help to build resilience. Next slide. So this slide here does talk about balancing ACEs with HOPE, and HOPE stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences. So those original 10 questions from the ACEs questionnaire, we have since added on a questionnaire to try and find out what your PCE score may be, and that stands for Positive Childhood Experiences, so you can work to balance that out. So in 2015, researchers at the Hope National Resource Center sought to better understand how positive childhood experiences, or PCEs, correlated with adult health. So with this study, they surveyed 6,000 adults in Wisconsin, asking those 7 questions that are listed here. So as a child, for instance, how often did you feel able to talk to your family about your feelings? How often did you enjoy participating in community traditions, or how often did you feel supported by friends? What they found is that the more positive childhood experiences respondents had, the lower the odds became of that individual reporting poor mental health as an adult. And multiple research articles actually have reported that the absence of positive childhood experiences result in a more dramatic shift in adult health than the presence of experiencing childhood adversity. So if you think about that, I'm going to go ahead and actually repeat that. The more positive childhood experiences you have, the lower the odds became of, the lower the odds became of you reporting poor mental health in adult. I'm reading my notes because I'm trying to make sure I cover this, and I got mixed up here, sorry. The more positive childhood experiences you had, my goodness gracious, since I mixed up now, let me repeat that for myself, I'm sure you caught it the first time I said it,
But it's always good to hit.
let me hit that the correct way this time, guys.
Yeah.
The absence of positive childhood experiences result in a more dramatic negative shift in adult health than the presence of experiencing childhood adversity. So that is important to note, because we can't change everything what happens in a child's life, in a family's life. We can't change what's happened in our past either. And even though the original study shows childhood adversity before the age of 18, we continue to experience challenges as adults, as young adults, as we go into older adulthood as well. And so it is important to remember that balancing that with positive experiences really, really makes a difference. Sorry about that. I feel like once I get started mixing up, then it continues. So
Can I add to that?
yes, absolutely.
So in my own personal situation, I have a good friend, and she had her grandmother, she had aunts that were that positive role model like she's talking about. And in my situation, I didn't have as much positive feedback and role models. So she went all the way. I'm at a snail's pace. Yeah. No, I'm no, just being serious. I'm at a snail's pace, but I recognized it, and now I'm making moves. But that's what she's talking about. That if you have the more positive role models and people you have around, the better you can overcome your ACEs.
Right, absolutely. And with children, specifically talking about children, it's important for them to have a positive, stable adult in their life. But as we get older, it's important to have relationships with friends. It doesn't have to be family members. It could be anybody. And so really developing that relational wealth really helps to mitigate the effects of experiencing all these challenges that we continue to go through in life. Thank you for that, Deborah.
You're welcome.
Next slide. So, and how this happens is that it's through brain plasticity. And show of hands, I'm sure you've heard of this term, brain plasticity. Excuse me, I cannot talk today. So brains are shaped, of course, by our experiences throughout our lifetime, both positive and negative. So, of course, the younger the brain, the greater the ability or plasticity or the capacity to change, right? But adult brains can also change as well. We can retain much of this plasticity. I'm having a hard time saying that word, plasticity, including the ability to actually repair damaged regions. So throughout our lifetime, our brains can actually reactivate these connections that have been inactive, or they can actually create new connections. And so has anybody heard the term neurons that wire together, fire together? So it really works to strengthen those connections. The malleability, of the brain is one of its greatest strengths, but it also means that there is vulnerability if the external experiences that we go through are chaotic or if they're extremely traumatic. Next slide. And I don't think it'll play yet. Okay. So, and now we're going to kind of shift to, I know we talk about trauma and adversity, but even experiencing daily stressors in life really take a toll and an impact on our bodies and our mental health. So of course, stress is not bad in and of itself. We need low levels of it. They affect our, can positively affect our learning and memory. So if you didn't have a level of stress, like would you guys study for tests? Or would you be able to meet work deadlines? I wouldn't. So we do need a certain level of low stress, right? But the more damaging stress, what we call toxic stress, it takes place when a person's exposed to strong, frequent, or prolonged stress without support. This can disrupt the development in children of healthy networks and brain connections, but it also affects our physical and mental health as adults as well. So I like to use I think Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris also used this as well. If you think about way back in the day, right, our ancestors, we lived in houses that, could have been caves, or, we lived in environments where we were constantly on alert. And if you imagine experiencing a bear, for instance, or even today, if you're on a hike, actually, in the mountains in North Georgia, and you see a bear, what happens in your body? Does anybody want to, what do you feel? Adrenaline, right? So when adrenaline kicks in, your heart starts racing, it pumps blood to your, not your extremities, but to your large muscle areas in your body, so that you're ready to either run, either fight, or whatever you need to do. I know one of the ways also is to hide as well. I'm not sure what works best with bears, but in doing this, right, so our heart starts racing, our pupils dilate, other areas of our body, actually, we reserve that energy for these other areas. So things like our digestive system slows down. That's why sometimes if you've ever done a presentation and you get really nervous, your mouth kind of gets dry. If you've experienced that, that's one of the things that happens. Our immune system also slows down because it doesn't need to go ahead and fix, whatever may be happening, because it needs that energy to be able to fight or flee. So when you're experiencing toxic stress, though, this is constantly happening within your body. So if you think about your immune system is not working as well as it should, we are more apt to develop illnesses and loads of other health effects as well. So this video here actually shows how positive relationships, again, and we keep referring to that. There are other ways to build resilience, but a big one of the easiest ways to do that is by developing our relational wealth and having those positive experiences or relationships with others. But this video does show how positive relationships and community support can provide a buffer to toxic stress caused by trauma. So I think if you just click on it.
We all want to give our children what they need to grow to their full potential. And as parents, we play an important role in their development. But our parenting is affected by the supports and challenges in our lives, including experiences that cause what's known as toxic stress. Stress is called toxic when it doesn't let up, and there aren't supportive relationships to help us cope. That can make it hard to get through the day, let alone be the best caregivers we can be. The overwhelming burden of toxic stress can affect the health and well-being of adults. It can also affect the development of children in ways that can last a lifetime. Stress that puts us in a constant state of fight or flight can make it feel like we're always on edge, or like it's impossible to calm down. And these feelings can overload our ability to provide the supportive relationships that children need in order to thrive. Think of toxic stress as heavy cargo. Just as a truck can only haul so much weight before it stops moving forward, challenging life circumstances, like losing a job or not having a place to live, can weigh us down. And just as a truck can break down if it carries too much for too long, we too can wear down from being overburdened without the support we need. When toxic stress is related to things we can't control, like poverty, abuse, or racism, it can feel especially heavy to take on. But experiencing toxic stress doesn't have to determine who we are or how we act. And understanding how stress affects us can empower us to make change in our lives. There are things we can do to buffer ourselves and our children against the effects of even the most intense stress. Just as redistributing cargo from an overloaded truck can help it run again. Supports and services, things like food pantries, job training programs, or even just talking with someone who cares, can help us focus on caring for ourselves and our children. And just as regular maintenance is required to keep a truck running, reliable access to community services can help us manage the load during challenging times. Reaching out to get support can be difficult, but things that might seem very small, like sitting and breathing deeply, playing I Spy with your child, or even sharing a walk or a snuggle can make a difference. Over time, these small steps can build our resilience and our children's by strengthening the skills and relationships that help us cope. And our communities can build resilience too by providing services and opportunities that help all families thrive. Supports like these help build a strong foundation for developing brain architecture. So the earlier we can provide them, the better. But the brain is capable of change throughout life, and it's never too late for a tune-up. Coping with and healing from toxic stress takes a lot of effort and support. But we all need the help of others in difficult times. And building resilience and strength in our families and communities is one of the most important investments we can make as a society. In the end, it will help all of us become the parents that we want to be.
The video always stops abruptly. It's kind of awkward. And they keep referring to parents. This is really for anybody as well. You don't have to be a caregiver. Since a lot of the information provided within this particular presentation is from Prevent Child Abuse Georgia, we do gear this towards parents and caregivers and also professionals who work with families. But again, this information holds true to everybody. So really kind of understanding our own experiences and how those how they affected our brain development, which then how it affects our behaviors, how we respond to other people in other situations. It's important to kind of have that understanding to then kind of work through some of the situations. And in addition to that, even if you hadn't experienced childhood adversity, which I'm not sure anybody who hasn't, I think we all have experienced very difficult challenges at some point or another in our lives, that we're able to kind of understand how stress affects us and really kind of work ways to provide those self-care techniques and practices to kind of work to mitigate the effects. So, next slide.
I think she had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your answer.
Actually, you have shown a video related to stress. But according to me, I can see there will be a support from everywhere. I'm not saying there is no support from parents, but according to the age, when a child has born, there will be a first parent, then later they will become a friendly. But it depends on the parents and a child relationship. So they need to understand, though they are far from parents or studying from away from parents, they need to understand what parents are, and even not everything, not all the students or all the children should depend on the parents. Sometimes parents may be there or may not be there, but back support will be there. It depends on the students who have to develop their own self and explore their own things. Be in front of others and be a bold, and they, the children are the ones who need to fight from the stress. It should not be always parents.
Hey, are you a parent?
No, I'm
not. You're absolutely right. So much is put on parents. And not only that, but parents aren't the only ones raising children, right? There's grandparents, there's aunts and uncles, there's
so every time parents can't be burdened because even they have other works like houses and they need to balance everything.
Yes, absolutely.
So even we are the students that we need to balance house, be the responsibility of the parents and know the burden and make the burden reduce from the parents' shoulders.
Right. Oh my goodness. Can I bring you with me? Reach that to my children? No.
I guess I understand what you're saying if you have a minute. So what you're saying is that children should be more responsible than just
Yes,
the parents?
and she's shown the homeless jobless about parents.
Mhm.
So I can think, but few children who do not have parents, they need support more.
Yes, yeah.
So for them, I know it is difficult to get support, but if they get support, they even they can come in a higher explore in higher way where they can stand in front of others and speak and communicate.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, it definitely takes more time for a child who has experienced a lot of
That's
adversity, a lot of trauma, because again, their brains and their bodies have gone through so much before they even made it to the point where they are today. And so it does take more time. And you know, sometimes you develop a relationship and then you kind of see them slip up, right? Maybe they stop coming to classes, or you know, something else is going on. And that's not to lose hope. It's just they're still working. They're working to strengthen those connections, because really having somebody who cares, and in some situations, this is the first time. This is the first time they have an adult who's really showing an interest in their lives. And so, and like you said too, it should not all be on parents. I agree. It's, you know, it's reciprocal, because as human beings, we co-regulate with others. So if somebody comes in here just yelling, that's gonna kind of bring your energy up, right? So we kind of match the energy from other people. And so if you've got a child that's always, you know, wild, it's, you know, it's definitely changes the parenting techniques as well. And so you're absolutely right. And were you gonna say something else, Deborah?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Next up.
Yeah, sure, next slide. So again, so talking about the power of relationships, the healing power of relationships, this works for adults as well. This works for all of us. It is beneficial for our health. Relationships help us to cope with and recover from stressful situations. They also improve our quality of life. So when we have strong connections with other people and supportive relationships in our lives, it's actually been reported that we have better physical and mental health. And studies have shown people self-reporting that they even feel richer and people live longer. Research also found, so if we have a good friend at work, we tend to actually work harder. If we have a good relationship with our supervisor, we tend to stay longer. That shouldn't be surprising.
Yeah.
But you know, really being socially connected helps our brains actually become sharper as well. So if you think about wiring those new circuits, it really makes a difference. Next slide here. So again, as we continue to emphasize the need for primary prevention and work to ease the impact for those who have experienced ACEs, the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy and Prevent Child Abuse Georgia launched this is a new training, but it's been around for a few years now, and it's called Connections Matter. So what I'm doing today is actually a shortened version of that called Connect Now. Next slide. And Connections Matter is a community-based initiative, and it explores how connections we make in our life profoundly impact our brain's ability to grow and our own individual abilities to cope and thrive. So really it works to build this awareness and spark interest in our communities, to really look at and review policies also and practices within our organizations, and assess how we can develop a more trauma-informed community. And really this starts within our homes. It starts, you know, we talk a lot about parents, how they're raising children, right? And really kind of work as a two-generation approach, right? You cannot help children without also helping their parents and vice versa. In addition to that, you have the systems that they live in, so their family, their community, their work environment. And so really what we're trying to do with Resilient Model Georgia is help to spark this change as well and really get systems change within our communities. Sorry, next slide. So the Connections Matter curriculum, it actually focuses again on three main objectives, and I've been covering several of these today. So educate individuals on the topics of ACEs, trauma, brain development, and resilience, and how they're all connected. Help individuals explore how ACEs impact brain development in children and negatively affect health outcomes. And then show individuals also how caring and nurturing connections can serve as that primary buffer to the negative effects of trauma. So it addresses both prevention of ACEs as well as steps towards healing. So, you know, I've been covering a lot of this today. It's kind of scratching the surface. So a lot of these additional workshops and trainings really kind of dips into it. They're more interactive as well. They're more fun. You know, we watch more videos, we get around, we, you know, chat with other people, and actually start to build connections within those training sessions as well. So I did, next slide. Did want to show this as well. We worked with Elaine and Dr. Rebecca Haslett-Knudsen to provide another training coming up. So this is called Becoming a More actually was called Becoming a More Resilient Parent. I've kind of changed this to caregiver or adult in general. Again, how we showed the toxic stress video, it does talk about parenting. This really applies to anybody. So we do have this coming up. It's on November 2nd from 11 to 1:30. We are going to be providing lunch. I believe we're going to do boxed Panera bread lunches. And it'll be in the math auditorium. So if you do want to register, you can go ahead and scan this QR code. Now, we've been talking about Connections Matter. That particular training is a 4-hour-long training. You actually do get CEUs. This is a shortened version of that, so it's 2.5 hours long. And it's actually a little bit more fun and more easy to digest, I guess, than sitting for 4 hours training, even though we do try to make it interactive. So I did want to provide this information here. And what this training will do also, we will talk about our responses to stress, the impact stress can have, and ways that we can actually promote positive childhood experiences and create resilience through that connection. So, and I think that I've talked a little fast and I may end a little bit earlier. Next slide here. So again, when you attend one of the Connections Matter trainings, which Becoming a More Resilient Parent, Caregiver, Adult is part of the Connections Matter training, you will learn about how our brains, relationships, and communities are all connected. So as we conclude, I challenge each of you today to share the information you learned about ACEs, because I think at the beginning we had, 3 hands come up, I believe. Register also for the training if you are available that day, and I can go back to that slide as well in a few. And also advocate for the prevention and treatment to build resilient communities. So even in our daily connections with others, having a more empathetic lens. So one example I like to include, if you're at the grocery store or any store really, and you see somebody just kind of being irate or something is going on. So instead of thinking like, oh, what's wrong with this person? I wouldn't behave in this manner. We kind of shift our thought process to think, what's happened to this person for them to have probably incredibly large amount of stress in their lives that they are reacting in this way. Further on down the road, we do have other trainings where we start more strength-based, like what's right with this person, but that's further on down the road. So even in building resilient communities, not just developing relationships, connections with others, it's really just the day-to-day interaction with other people. So next slide here. We do, of course, have to show the contributors for this Connect Now presentation and Connections Matter trainings. Georgia Center for Child Advocacy, Prevent Child Abuse Georgia, Prevent Child Abuse Iowa, Prevention and Community Support Section, so DPACS, and also Dr. Stan Sanu with Emory University. Has anybody heard of Dr. Sanu? We've actually worked with him we are working with primary pediatrics here locally in Middle Georgia, and we are working to implement some measures within the pediatric center to really look at stressors that children experience, and really what it is to mitigate the effects before it does end up in long-term health outcomes. But Dr. Stan Sanu is wonderful. He actually has a TED Talk out there that you can watch. It's called The Science of Adversity and the Case for Systemic Empathy. So if I send an email or anything after this through Elaine or however the case is, I can definitely send you a link to his TED Talk as well. Do you want me to circle back to that QR code if anybody would like to register? That's okay. We can go forward if nobody else. The last slide just kind of gets my contact information as well. That's always fun to watch. So again, my name is Amanda Juarez. I am the project coordinator with Resilient Middle Georgia. Just to reiterate, we are an initiative, so we are not a nonprofit. We're not working on our own. We really work with other organizations to help embed this and provide support to see how we as a community can move forward to implement some of these changes to really help with our generation and future generations. And so I've ended a little bit early, so I don't know if you want to come up to say anything else, or if I would want to go ahead and if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand or just shout out.
We can do questions if anybody has any.
Did anybody have any aha moments on hearing about the ACEs study? Was anything shocking? Sometimes when we hear this, even though you haven't heard of it originally, once you start hearing about it, you're like, oh, that makes complete sense. Like, that, how did we not, how is this not talked about more frequently and more often? It really does make sense. Did you want to add anything as well?
Well, yeah, I had some, when I first learned about this and started working with Amanda in Resilient Middle Georgia, I was surprised that stress could raise your risk of so many different illnesses, diabetes and cancers, and it just really shocked me. It scared me too, like you said. I'm like, oh my God, I'm feeling like I had that feeling too. But I don't think it's ever too late to help yourself, because I know it's geared toward children, but I think it can also help us as adults if we've already gone through some things. Now we know, okay, we had these issues, now I need to start working to be healthier and taking better care of myself to change or redirect all of this stuff that could possibly happen to me in my health. Like, cause I have a service dog, I have PTSD from the traumas that I dealt with. And working with Resilient Village, Georgia has really been good for me because they're patient with me and they understand and they, help me along. So I'm lucky in that aspect, but I still have a lot of work to do on myself. So if you have ACEs or a lot of ACEs, just go ahead and jump in and start taking better care of yourself.
Thank you for sharing. Yes.
What's the percentage of when more likely it is for a parent has?
Can you speak up?
How more likely is it that if you're a parent and you have maybe like 2 to 4 or 5 cases for your child to get them as well? Like, what's the percentage? Like, what's the likelihood?
Right, absolutely. That's a really good question. So it's a loaded question, actually. There are a few ways to answer that. So, of course, the experiences that we have actually change our genes and our gene expression. So through epigenetics, we can pass certain traits, certain things down to our children from our experiences. So you do have a level of that, but that's a little bit more of a predisposition. So depending on the experiences then that child has, that gene can either express itself or not. In addition to that, though, what can happen, and this is not obviously the case with everybody, what can happen is through experiencing a lot of adverse experiences, if you did engage in risky behaviors, if you do have maybe a substance use disorder, right, that's definitely going to trickle and affect your children as well. And that'll affect the environment that they live in, maybe the people that you are around as well. Maybe they could experience some type of domestic violence situation as well. But that isn't to say that if you experience a lot of adversity as a child that you're not going to be a good parent as an adult. And so I think what's so important about getting this information out there is really kind of understanding, okay, if I went through all these different things, that really does make sense on why sometimes I react in a certain way. And really, have you guys heard of the brain model where you kind of use your hands, right? Like this is the limbic system. This is, and we talk with children a little bit more about this. So this is kind of the limbic system, and within that is the amygdala, which is our kind of emotion center. And I'm kind of dumbing it down quite a bit, So for those of you who do take classes where you are learning more about brain development, please don't judge me the way I'm explaining this. But within that, within our limbic system, we do have, we're kind of hotwired to feel very strongly about things that happen to us. So if we feel very fearful or even, happy memories as well, kind of go to that area. And so experiencing a lot of adversity in childhood, we talk about that part of your brain's really kind of been doing push-ups, right? It's really, really strong. And so you're much more likely to wire circuit back to that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the memories that we have, the experiences we have, our memories can actually fade, right? I don't remember a lot of things about my childhood, especially when I was very, very young. But again, that body still remembers. That part was still doing all these different push-ups. So maybe something happened to you and if somebody raises their voice at you, it activates it. Or if you have a certain smell, or if somebody behaves in a certain manner that you don't really know why, but it kind of activates you, there's a reason for that. And when that happens, I'm always doing this, like it's the top part of our brain, right? Our cortex, and especially our frontal lobes, which really again is our inhibition, it helps us give us a pause to really kind of think about situations. So pause before we react. That kind of gets, I can't remember which doctor mentioned oh my goodness, I can't even think of what it's called now, where you flip your lid, right? And you go right to this reactive area. So we do talk with children also, or families with children, and because we want to teach these skills to kids as well. So we talk about this part could be called the barking dog, right? And so when the barking dog, or the dog's barking, right, it scares away what we call the wise owl. And I didn't come up with this term, this you can see videos out there as well. So, if something happens and the dog's barking, the wise owl flies away. So in order to kind of regulate, self-regulate, or help a child or somebody else regulate, you have to calm down that barking dog for the wise owl to come back, right? And different ways to do that, I'm sure since we are experiencing a lot of system change in our communities, this information is becoming much more readily available. But ways to do that are through deep breathing, right? Deep breathing, grounding ourselves, just kind of, sometimes you can set your hands on a surface and really just kind of be in that moment, experience that, a sense of mindfulness in that moment. Sometimes it helps to listen to music. It does for me, for sure, or taking a walk outside. So in order to kind of calm down that, we do have to, in order to activate the thinking part of our brain, our cortex, right, to be able to respond in a more thoughtful manner, we do have to calm that part of our brain. And now I'm kind of losing track, I think, of what your original question was. I'm probably answering it, my goodness. Oh, it was if we do have ACEs, whether or not that.
Yeah, you're saying that just because you might have experience that doesn't mean you won't be a good parent.
Absolutely, 100%.
Can I say?
Yes, and I'm sorry I went on a tangent there.
That was very helpful. That was very helpful.
That's like I was, when I was saying about me and a friend of mine, like how she went all the way, and we grew up the same, pretty much the same. Her kids are great. She's a great mom, so I think it can go either way. It depends on if you had a number of ACEs growing up, it depends on how you take care of yourself in some situations.
I am so glad you mentioned that because you definitely have to take care of yourself. When I am experiencing a lot of stress, I get much more easily irritated and frustrated. And those are not the times that I want my child to start asking me questions or, I don't want to come across a certain kind of way, right? So when we are experiencing high levels of stress ourselves, we don't react the way that we want to other people as well. So it is very important to kind of learn ways to self-regulate as well to then work in a more mindful manner with others. Yes? So,
yeah, just now you said that they're not showing in front of children. I agree with it because I have experienced about it. I have seen parents are struggling a lot from their homeless or jobless or they have lots of stress. But when the children come in front of them, they'll just react as if they're normal. They'll never show the stress, and if they're in tears also, they'll never show because they don't like the children should be always stressed and they don't like the children in front of the children that they're homeless or not.
right,
And
right.
they want their children to be like be free and be friendly. They
Right,
don't want any
absolutely.
stress to whatever they have stress. They don't want their children to take it. They want stressless.
No, you're absolutely right. That can be very, very hard for people to do,
People
though.
to manage.
Especially say you're a single parent or caregiver with 5, 6 children, and you're worried about trying to make ends meet, or whether or not you're able to pay the power bill, or if you have a place to stay. It's really, really hard, and I commend those parents or those caregivers who are able to set aside all of these stressors that they experience in their life and make sure that they don't project that onto their children. And so that's really important. I struggle with that actually myself sometimes, where I'm like, I've learned the language though to tell my children maybe I'm feeling a little overstimulated at the moment. Mommy needs a couple minutes. If I'm very stressed out, I don't want to have them start taking on that level of stress. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you.
Did you have another question?
I was just saying, working off of that, I feel like that also makes it 10 times harder for the parent.
Oh, I was thinking that too.
And it might develop even more mental issues.
Yeah.
Being like having 2 faces.
Yeah.
Almost. But it makes sense because it's needed for the child.
Yeah, they need a time because a time comes when the 2 phases. They'll say, I'm getting some.
I'm probably rubbing off on your
Yeah, the way, if somebody teaches also no, but the way will teach you something like that.
Right, absolutely.
The life will teach you. When maybe for us or for parents, the time may come, they need to show 2 faces, and at that time parents should be mentally strong and prepared in front of their children.
Right.
Because children are like a strong way they can get to know what the parents are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even children will not say, because parents again will feel stress and then will be the high eating.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and I'm with you. I was thinking that too, that, oh, how hard would that be on the parent to be able to, set aside all of this. But I wonder, though, if they have supports in their life, other people to talk to. It could be as simple as calling your mother, your sister, your friend, anybody, your neighbor, or whoever the case is, and just kind of, even maybe if it's a matter of having somebody listen to you to vent for a few minutes. Having some outlet and some connection when you are experiencing all of this, a lot of toxic stress. Well, actually, it wouldn't be toxic stress if you do have a support, When you're experiencing a lot of stress is very important. So I wonder if parents who are experiencing all of that, if they're able to set that aside and not project that onto their children, that I assume they would have, some supports in their life as far as relationships with others. So.
And other one you were talking about AIDS about genetic according to her question. So I am saying that it is right according to it depends on genetic. While sometimes when a newly born will say to their parents that your baby is healthy, your baby is like this and all. It depends on this one doctors how they will give a report to the parents and how the parents will be prepared. And if there is no AIDS in family or anything, or if then the family members will not get AIDS or children will. And if any family members like grandparents, ancestors, or anybody who's staying in the family or in a joint family or in family members, if anyone gets AIDS, then automatically children will also get it. But it is rare, I think. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's still very, you can still attach it pretty easily.
Yeah, and one more is no, actually parents will not do it because children are like will be depressed and stressed like for the studies or something. Or parents were, nowadays we can see that parents are busy in their work schedules, they do not have time to share.
Right.
Spend time with family members or their children. And when they have holidays, they'll be busy in their online meals or booking groceries or something.
Right.
So, every time phone, laptops, they do not have time with the children to spend. So, by that, children will also not get time and they'll get some stress and by then they'll be feeling anxiety. Loneliness.
Absolutely. I wish I have this slide in here from the full length training, but it shows actually brain development, the differences between a healthy child's brain and the other. It contrasted with actually an infant in Romania who was neglected as an infant. And that is one of the more extreme cases, but it really shows the difference in our brain structure and how if we are not working on those neurons aren't firing, we lose that activity in our brains. And so I'm glad you mentioned that because maybe some people, grow up homeless, or maybe, they're living in a car, or they're going, from place to place, or they live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of community violence, for instance. Sometimes though, when they have those supports within their family, and they have cousins or they have siblings or whoever may be raising them, if they have that sense of connection, they're able to still make it in a healthy way in life, right? But then you have contrasting families who have a lot of resources, right? They have a lot of money, they have all these different things, they don't have that connection.
No, actually I don't have any contrasting family, I can see. Only my mom and my their support, and my mom is the one who gives some values, but not such kind of things.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, and I was gonna add to that, again, the situations that we were raised in, that's not a prediction for how our life will end up being, right? It's because you experience ACEs in childhood does not mean that you're gonna, your children are gonna experience the same ACEs. And we can definitely learn from this information, this data that's out there, and really work to mitigate, the effects from experiencing any adversity. And really, to build resilience, we have to experience some sort of challenge in life to be able to work through it, right? So somebody who's been coddled and protected, in childhood, right? Where they say, even when it comes to doing their own homework, I do know some families that will do their children's projects for them, right? some that I've heard that went into college and their parents are still doing. And not saying that, but it's wild. It's wild. Well, that child is never going to learn how to handle any difficulties in life, right? So when something happens, they're going to break down. They're not going to be able to handle it. So we do need to experience some sort of challenge, right, to be able to practice those skills and work through it. So. Again, I feel like a lot of this presentation seems very, very negative. That, oh my goodness, all these things happen, and it's very common. A lot of these experiences are very, very common. That doesn't mean that again that we're doomed to that. We're going to live 20 years younger. We can work to mitigate the effects and really work going forward to live healthier, more resilient lives. So,
is that considered also like a negative basis as well? Like if you came from a very closed in, you didn't get to experience a lot, you're very safe all the time. Isn't that negative too? Wouldn't that
I feel like it
is.
I feel like it is. I don't think that has been added on any recent studies that I'm aware of, but I can definitely look into that because, yeah, I do. Again, the original study showed only 10 experiences, but there's so many more out there that can really shape and mold us. And so that's a really good point that you brought up, yeah.
So I hate to cut the discussion short, but I do want to be mindful of time. So for those of you who want to go, feel free. If you didn't sign in, grab food. If those of you who want to stay and keep asking questions, please do.
Can we circle back to the QR code?
Oh, yes.